This is Sway.
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 In the morning.
In the morning.
In the morning.
Shake this body.
Wake your fuck ass up.
What a shock this bomb was, even to the scientists that had created it. You know, they thought it would be 4 or 5 megatons. It ended up being 15 megatons.
We've brought a dosimeter which measures radioactivity.
It's off the chart. It's 550.
Spiking up, it's reading about, whoa.
The radiation readings are higher than an average person is exposed to naturally in a year.
And on the boat, we were reading about 200, maybe 220. So here, just ambient air, it's like just over 400.
Wow.
There's not even a reading for that.
No, it's the bar is maxed out. I think we should get out of here.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time here.
Okay, that was a clip. You know, Shark Week is amongst us, Heather B, and as you know, and this is like probably the highest rated week on Discovery Channel of the year.
Right.
I mean, sharks have such a cult following. And initially, it was because of a lot of what Hollywood did and what Hollywood presented to us, especially with the movie Jaws. So we pretty much got our information about sharks from watching movies. Mm-hmm. But it's great that it's shows like this that take place on the Discovery Channel. Matter of fact, this particular show is called Nuclear Sharks. It premieres Thursday, June 30th at 9 p.m. And we have Philippe and Ashlyn Cousteau are here with us today. Ashlyn, I couldn't pronounce your middle name, so I just, or is it Gorse?
Gorse. That was my maiden name.
That's your maiden name?
My maiden name.
Oh, so you're one of those. You want to keep the maiden name in there?
I keep it every once in a while.
Yeah.
Her father had 2 daughters, so she's trying to help, kind of keep
sorry,
a little
Dad.
bit of the represent.
Trying to keep the name alive?
A little bit, yeah.
So I'm that's
You okay with that, Philippe?
Absolutely.
Yeah? Okay.
I mean, Gorse
And I like her
versus
dad,
Cousteau.
so I'm actually good with that.
We
we like
gotta go
Tony.
Cousteau. It's much prettier.
Cousteau is legendary.
Exactly. I think I'm the 10th. I think I'm the 10th Cousteau now.
Yeah, there's
right?
only 10 or 11 in the world with the name. So.
Wow.
With Cousteau?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jacques
Whoa.
Cousteau is like a legendary. I always thought as a kid that Jacques Cousteau wasn't real. I thought it was just like a
Like a
folk
myth?
tale. Yeah, like I did.
No, I agree with that. That's true.
Right?
I thought the same thing. I
he
didn't
was
think
a
it
Like
was
good
Popeye or something. Right?
He did eat
Get some
spinach.
spinach.
So,
Yeah. And his grandson is here. Wow. Philippe, man. He's flesh and blood.
And is very happy to be here.
Very happy to have you, man. And this is Shark Week is like one of my favorite weeks. And we just had Blake Lively on, and she was speaking about her new movie, The Shallows, and it's about a shark and a relationship, the things she went through with a shark that was in the waters. And let's talk about this nuclear shark show before we get into that. Now, you guys, this actually took place in a place or in an environment that was affected by nuclear waste, or what's
By
this?
bombs.
By actual bombs.
Yeah, so during the Cold War, the United States conducted over 60 nuclear tests in the Marshall Islands because they realized the bombs were getting too big to detonate them in the Nevada desert. So, and one of the bombs we detonated, Castle Bravo at 15 megatons, was like 1,000 times stronger than Hiroshima. So, like, these things were getting really, really big. So they had to find a place in the middle of absolutely nowhere to do it. So over 60 bombs annihilated every living thing on these islands, destroyed the islands themselves. Some of them turned to glass. To give you an idea, the surface of the ocean, the water temperature rose to 3 times hotter than the surface of the sun in like milliseconds.
Wow.
That's the destructive force of these bombs. So everything was killed.
Everything.
How many years ago was that?
It was about 70 years ago.
About 70 years ago.
It was in the 50s.
So how is the ecosystem in that area affected today?
It was beautiful. I mean, everything, nature has actually taken back over, and it has flourished. And the crater, the big bomb that Philippe was talking about, that was called Castle Bravo. And we actually were able to dive in the crater that was still left from that bomb. And in the actual crater, there was nothing. I think we saw a couple hermit crabs and some sponges. But if you just walked right outside of that crater and walked over to the other side and you dove in, and it was the most beautiful coral, the fish. I mean, we were constantly surrounded by hundreds of gray reef sharks who had never seen people before. I mean, we were there's only been maybe a dozen of people that have actually dove in that crater. So these sharks had never really seen people or boats for that matter. And not once did we feel threatened, or not once were we scared. And it is honestly a true testament to nature to actually see that after it is the worst that humanity can throw at it. I mean, that is the worst thing we could do, is throw a nuclear bomb at something. And it has been brought back to life.
That resilience, right?
Yes.
Was it dangerous at all? Like, are there still levels of radiation in that area?
Yeah.
For
There
you
is.
guys, right? You were exposed.
Yeah.
Well, and the segment that you played earlier, we go there and like more radiation than you're exposed to in a year just standing there. So, it's a lot. We didn't stay very long. But in the water, the radiation dispersed. And we'd heard these rumors of this place called Shark Pass. I mean, just a cool name. We were like, Shark Pass, I got to go check it out.
Yeah.
And that there are hundreds of sharks swirling around. And we wanted to go see. And indeed, it was true. It was absolutely spectacular.
Okay, so I love how you guys describe being around sharks, and and listen, out of all of us, you have the most experience, right? So, reef sharks aren't normally dangerous.
No,
right?
no. We didn't know how they would respond. As Ashton said, they've never been around people before. They are pack hunters. So that's can be a dangerous situation.
Mm-hmm.
One reef shark is one thing. 70 reef sharks is another thing entirely. So we weren't quite sure how they'd respond, but they ended up they behaved themselves mostly. Some of them a few times came in a little too close, and we had these little metal wands that you can just kind of wrap them on the nose with. And their noses are very, very sensitive because that's where they kind of sense the world.
Yeah.
And so then they swim off. But yeah, you're always watching your buddies back on this situation because there are sharks swimming all over the place.
And the cool thing about these reef sharks, these gray reef sharks, are they're sharks that actually show you when they're being aggressive. They make a posture, kind of like a cat. They curve their back and they kind of move their mouth really quickly from side to side. So then you're like, uh-oh, I got to watch out for that one.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think twice I had to bonk. I only had to bonk 2 on the nose with my little shark fairy wand. But I think, did you have to bonk any?
Once or twice. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So what goes into the psyche of a person who wants to swim with sharks? Just, I'm just curious because the first thing you asked me, Philippe, is, hey man, have you ever swam with white sharks?
Well, so this is what I always tell people. So I did a film with CNN several years ago. We were living on the Arctic sea ice for 9 days. It was minus 45 degrees, and everyone's like, "Why do you do that?" And we go diving with sharks. People are like, "Why do you do that?" And I was like, because it's the days that you do something to test your limits. Those are the days that you remember in life, right? The 9 days I slept in minus 45 degrees, I remember and talk about those days every day. 365 days of the year, most of us, at least here, are fortunate enough to have a comfy bed.
Yeah.
And none of it's memorable. Like, none of that stuff really stands out. And it's the experiences where you're surrounded by 70 sharks that you will tell your children and grandchildren about for the rest of your life. Sitting in a comfy chair at home watching TV is not like the experiences that makes life fantastic. So that's my perspective, is like, it's hard, it's scary, it's dangerous, but that's what makes life worth living.
Philippe Cousteau.
So it's so interesting that someone can make a career off of being an explorer, because I just think of 18th century, whoever was like Christopher Columbus's squad.
Right.
Those are the explorers. So how do you guys make an income from that? Like, who actually pays you?
Well, so my background is a little interesting. I was an entertainment reporter for a long time. I worked for E! News for almost 10 years. I worked for Entertainment Tonight. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I know you from. Oh, man. We know each other.
Exactly. I know. So but I just started realizing that I was kind of fed up talking about Justin Bieber and the Kardashians every day. But then I would go out to my friends to cocktail parties, and that's all they wanted to talk about. So I'm like, I love pop culture, but I only need a little bit of it, not my whole life to be it. So I've always been a water baby, and I've always loved traveling. So when I first met Philippe, we closed down a restaurant. They were literally vacuuming around our feet the first night we met, because we just sat there and we talked about travel and adventure, and that's was so important to us, and that's where we lead full lives. And we just decided that, I really want to make our world and make going out and having adventures cool. I want kids to look at Philippe and I and say, holy crap, I want to do that for a living. Like, I want to go tag sharks. I want to go look for Bengal tigers in Nepal. Like, that's really fun. So for me, it's kind of this idea of bringing adventure to life, and people that can't go on these adventures, I hope that they feel like they are with us when they're watching our shows. So
that's the main thing. Is like through documentaries, things like that, is the way you kind of can make a living doing this. It's not easy, but it's still best job, I think.
Yeah.
Wow. Nuclear Sharks premieres Thursday, June 30th at 9 p.m. on the Discovery Channel. Philippe and Ashlyn Gorse Cousteau are here. Damn, Ashlyn.
I know.
Good to see you.
The new last name throws people off.
It throws us off. I want to talk about animals have been in the news lately, and I want to get you guys' feedback about what we've been seeing happening at zoos and outside of zoos and otherwise, all right? And open up these phone lines. If you're a shark fan, 888-742-3345. Give us a call. Sway in the Morning Shade 45. Shark Week is here, and Nuclear Shark premieres Thursday, June 30th. We have Philippe. And we have Ashlyn Gorse Cousteau. They're both here. Philippe is the grandson of Jacques Cousteau, man. That's just... Hey, man, growing up as a kid, man, did you get a lot of props? Like, kids kind of went, wow, that's your granddad?
Yeah. Growing up, people always thought, but they had a different opinion. They always thought I was like on Calypso and traveling the world and all those kinds of things. But my dad died 6 months before I was born, and my mother's from L.A. So I actually born in Santa Monica and lived in L.A. for the first few years of my life. So I think that just kind of kids got over it pretty quickly at school, and then it was just kind of business as usual. But at first, definitely kids, and you go to a restaurant and people were just like, oh my God, Cousteau, it's a big deal. But my grandfather was never like that. He was the most mellow dude on the planet. Like, he'd meet people and people would come up to him, ask for autographs. He was always very polite, always friendly. And I learned a lot from that, like the humility and just the friendliness and the kindness, and realizing that, the work is important, but it doesn't, like, just because you are on television and stuff doesn't make you any more special than anyone else. Being on TV isn't what matters. It matters what you do with your life and how you try to make the world better. And that's the measure of a man, my grandfather taught me.
Damn, Philippe, damn, man.
I know, right? Could you imagine if he had that and a French accent?
Yeah. Whoa, man.
My head would just explode.
You guys are cute.
So we've been, you guys are, you study, you're explorers, adventurers, you study animals like sharks and Bengal tigers. What is your take on what we've been seeing? Like, we've seen in recent weeks, we saw a child that was attacked by an alligator in Florida. Prior to that, we saw another child that fell into a cage and got, it got attacked by I don't even know if it was attacked by the gorilla,
Handled.
It got handled by the gorilla. Right, and then we saw another child fell into a cage and got attacked by these rare African dogs and was mauled to death. What's going on, man? What you guys deal with animals? A lot of us, we tend to demonize the animals, not understanding the animal's behavior and what their intent is. What do you think?
Well, I'll start with the zoos in particular. There are so many mammals that shouldn't be kept in zoos, that are either too smart to be there, they are too big to be there, or they really need more space to be there. So for me, a lot of times when I go to zoos and I see things like elephants, or when I see gorillas, or some of the larger monkeys and apes, it really hurts my heart, because I realize that these animals are just as smart as us. They actually have self-recognition. If you put a mirror in front of an elephant or a gorilla, they know it's their reflection, and that is a quality of extremely high intelligence. And for me personally, I would say that I think a lot of times we don't have the right animals in zoos. So I would start with that.
Yeah, and I would add that we were filming, a little anecdote, we were filming in Yellowstone last year for another show that I host. And the stories from the rangers that you hear of people walking up with their babies and like putting them on the back of a wild buffalo and stepping back and taking a picture, of them complaining to the rangers when the animals, they're like, why don't you train them better to be next to the road so we can see them and film them?
So we can take pictures of them.
So we can take pictures. And taking selfies with like bull elk in rutting season, and then we're surprised when bad things happen. So I think that one of the challenges is we have to remember that not everything is sterile and trained in the world, and we live in a world where there are other animals. In Florida, the terrible tragedy. I mean, my heart goes for everybody to these parents that dealt with that terrible tragedy of their child. But you're in a part of the world, you're in places where there are wild animals, and bad things can happen. And I think we get so like sterilized and everything we think is just so like manicured in life that we forget that there is nature that exists on the planet.
Wow.
That being said, how many alligator deaths have there been in the last, if we look at the big picture in the last few decades, like a handful. So I mean, still nature is not nearly as scary. I always tell people, they think of shark attacks, and you mentioned, you were talking about this earlier, you'll have more likelihood of being killed by a vending machine falling on you than, hitting by lightning, all these different things. The same with, sharks or bears or alligators. So at the end of the day, driving down the highway is still a lot more dangerous than interacting with these kinds of animals, as long as you do it respectfully.
As long as you do it respectfully.
Yes.
Yeah, man. You know, even with sharks, man, people are so scared of sharks. You know, and it's all these different. You know, sharks have all these stereotypes about them. But when Blake Lively came here, she said, you know, sharks kill less people than. I know she said selfies.
Yeah, selfies was 12 people.
She said hamburgers.
I can see
definitely.
that.
Yeah.
Said deer.
Far fewer than
They
hamburgers.
kill less people than
The
deer as
deer.
well
See
because
deer?
deer with the traffic, you know, on the roads as you mentioned before. Yeah.
Yep.
We got Bobby on the line from Chicago. Go ahead, Bobby. Good morning.
Good morning, Sway. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I got the Cousteau family in here, man. I'm popping in Shark World.
Yeah, man. That's what's up. Nice to meet you all. How y'all doing?
We're
good.
great.
How you doing, man?
I'm all right. Thanks for asking. Hey, Heather, how are you?
Hey.
Hey, Bobby. Tracy's here, too.
Yeah, Rob.
Yeah. Hey, go ahead, Bobby, what's your question?
I wanted to ask you, in terms of being interested in sharks and whatnot, and most of this planet being covered in water, do you believe the megalodon sharks are still out there?
Megalodon shark?
No, I could say we know that Megalodon did exist, but he sadly is not here anymore because that's a shark I would really like to see.
I would not want to see it in the water, but I would like to see it from a distance.
Yep.
But yeah, I would like to see that. No, megalodons, no more megalodons, unfortunately. But I've seen megalodon teeth, and they're like as big as your fist. They're big.
Yeah, it was a huge prehistoric shark.
Yeah.
Now, what purpose do sharks serve to the ecosystem?
It's a great question. So when you think of, a lot of people think of like wolves, for example. We've all heard about how wolves help to cull the herd, and they eat the sick and the dying, and they kind of keep the populations down. Mm-hmm. If you don't have any wolves, you get then too many elk, and then they eat all the vegetation, and then they starve, the next season. So they're like nature's balance on the health of the system. And without sharks, we've seen whole reef ecosystems collapse. And then that means that all the fish that people like to fish and eat and support local economies disappear. And then people are out of work, and then people are starving.
Wow.
So sharks have a really important role. When 1 billion people rely on seafood as their primary source of protein in developing parts of the world particularly, you start to remove sharks, those systems collapse. You have major humanitarian problems. You have mass migrations of people. People turn to things like crime and terrorism. The piracy in Somalia is a great example. That really has its roots in collapsing fisheries. People couldn't feed themselves anymore.
Right, yeah.
And so they started to turn
fishermen.
they were all fishermen. So they
Right.
started to hijack boats to try and make money. And originally they hijacked boats that were illegally fishing. And then they realized, well, people will pay for these boats back. The light bulb went off. And then they turned to, then that started the whole piracy thing, which cost hundreds of lives, thousands of lives, billions of dollars. It becomes this whole issue, and it all ties back down to sharks and fish on a reef.
Man, that was dope, dude. Give that man a round of applause, man.
Wow.
I think that's how we'll end this interview right here, man.
Mind blown.
Damn, man. You did good. You did good.
I appreciate it, man.
Man, Philippe Cousteau, Ashlyn Gorse Cousteau. Make sure you guys tune in to Shark Week. Nuclear Sharks premieres Thursday, June 30th on the Discovery Channel, 9 p.m. Make sure you watch it. Hey, one day I want to come out with you guys.
You're coming with us on the next shark
do it.
boat. You're doing it.
On the
We'll
shark
get you in the
boat.
water, man.
I don't know about that.
You can just come
I'm
on the boat
like the Megalodon.
I
I'll
like a
watch from
challenge.
afar. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I
Well,
like a
let
challenge.
me fill it out.
with a nice glass of wine.
Yeah.
We'll
Watch
ease it in.
Yeah.
Okay,
Couple
cool.
cocktails always helps.
Okay,
For me,
great.
anyway.
Okay, good. All right, great. We got YG is here, man. He got the new project. You want to talk with YG? It's 888-742-3345.
It's Sway in the morning. Only
On Shea 45.